and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Tyler Reid. I'm the Manufacturing Applications Manager here at GoEngineer, and today I get to go over a quick recap over some of the cool things I've been able to do this month of April. This webinar is being broadcast live. That means you do have the opportunity to ask me questions. If you have a question at any time, use the chat window or the questions box in the GoToMeeting user interface, and we'll address those as they come up. So April was a big month for the 3D printing industry. We had two of the largest events / conferences of the year, just a couple weeks apart, AMUG and Rapid+TCT. And I was fortunate enough to be able to attend both, and I know a lot of people weren't. So I thought it would be kind of a fun idea for a webinar to do a quick recap of my personal experience and hopefully give you guys some links at the end here to look up some more specific events or specific information about these conferences in case I don't hit all the points that you're interested in. Here at GoEngineer, we are both Stratasys and Desktop Metal partners, and so my experiences were kind of biased towards those offerings, but I wanted to give people an idea of what to expect if they were to attend one of these conferences in the future. And because I do recommend you attend both, but it depends on what your needs or interests are. If you can only choose one, you might choose one or the other. So first up was the AMUG conference. This year it was in St. Louis, Missouri. It was my second conference for AMUG. I went last year when it was in Chicago, and I knew after my experience last year that I had to go again this year. I would say that it is probably my favorite conference that I get to go to all year long, and the reason for that is because it's very user-focused. As someone who works for a partner but uses 3D printers on the daily, I feel like AMUG offers a lot in terms of knowledge share and networking and just an overall good experience for a user. This is a photo I snapped when I arrived on Sunday afternoon. So AMUG is truly a week-long event. It goes from Sunday to Thursday, and you're there all day. They feed you breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They take you out for a group activity one of the nights, and you truly are there to just immerse yourself in 3D printing and the users of 3D printers. It's a smaller show in terms of exhibitors. I would say there was just over 100 exhibitors, I believe, as opposed to something like Rapid, which had 350 plus exhibitors. So AMUG is more focused on the users. AMUG, if that's a strange word for you, it's actually an acronym for Additive Manufacturing Users Group. And it is a conference, but if you ask the AMUG leadership, they would call it an event. This was their 30th year, it's hard to believe that 3D printing has been around long enough to have a user group meeting 30 years strong, and that's the case. As I mentioned, AMUG is very user-focused. In fact, you can't even attend unless you or your company owns professional additive manufacturing equipment. So that's one of the barriers to get into this event is you have to have some personal experience or be tied to some sort of professional level equipment. The agendas are very focused on presentations. I would say first and foremost, there's keynote presentations each morning, and then the mornings and afternoons are filled with presentations from OEMs, service providers, and users. There's a variety of workshops where they're hands-on presentations. There's also some competitions, and this is an area that I didn't really participate in too much. I did go around and look at some of the participants in the various competitions, but it's nice to see them. This is part of the experience, I would say. But if there's one thing that sets the AMUG experience apart from other conferences is the amount of networking and amount of focus on getting to know everybody in the industry. Like I said, they offer breakfast, lunch, dinner. There's break periods in between. The food's great. The company's great. One of the most interesting things they have you do during lunchtime as you're walking into the mess hall is you pick a number out of a bowl, and that number is your table assignment. And so everybody is forced to mix and mingle at lunchtime. And for those of you who are introverted, which I tend to be, this really forces you to get out of your comfort zone and meet people from, honestly, not even just around the country, but around the world. I had dinner with or lunch with people from Belgium and Germany and Japan and Canada and all sorts of incredible places. So Todd Grimm, in my experience, has been doing the opening keynote and is sort of the master of ceremonies for AMUG. He's always got an interesting perspective on the AM industry. I think his finger's on the pulse, a little bit better than anybody else I know of. His opening keynote was talking about the additive manufacturing industry being in sort of a tunnel right now. Maybe having tunnel vision and going down a path that is sort of, the path of least resistance, but it is preventing the industry from really breaking through into where we want to be, and that's in production, production manufacturing, creation of high volume, parts and services. And so in order to break out of that tunnel, we have to kind of change our way of thinking. There has to be either some technological breakthroughs or something's going to have to happen for us to really step up and participate in the greater manufacturing environment in a meaningful way. It was a good presentation. Following the keynotes is where you pull out your app and you start looking at the agenda, and you really got to pick and choose carefully which presentations you want to hit. These are just the tracks. We have metals and non-metals technologies, a materials track, aerospace and defense, medical and dental, all sorts of different tracks, and each one of these tracks had dozens of different presentations. Now, luckily, as an attendee, I can get online and download the presentations that I missed, assuming that they were uploaded in the first place, which most of them are. But you really do have to pick and choose which ones you want to see. So I kind of laid out a few of my favorite over these next couple slides just to give you guys a sneak preview as to, what's offered. And I wish I could share all the slides, but unfortunately I can't. One of the more interesting presentations I saw from a large OEM was from BMW. BMW's group from Dominic Retzel, in charge of the additive manufacturing group. BMW has really embraced additive in many ways on their shop floor, production floor, but also, this is most interesting, is they're using technologies like SLS to offer customization or personalization actually in the vehicle. We saw some parts that you're able to pick and choose designs and colors and phrases and actually have them in your car, which was really neat. Another big automotive OEM that had a keynote presentation was Volkswagen. Their presentation on digitalization, talking about artificial intelligence, big data, analytics, and how it can be used to improve the additive manufacturing industry, I thought was pretty fascinating. They kind of pitched the AM industry today versus what their vision is, which is a much larger, more efficient, more capable industry. And we're on the road there. AM has been small historically, and that smallness really prevents us from growing at the rate we need. Higher adoption means faster growth, and in order to get the higher adoption, we really need to embrace the large OEMs kind of steer the industry in that way, I would say. So this was an interesting perspective. But we also, on top of these large OEMs like BMW and Volkswagen, GE, Honeywell, all these big names, we also have a lot of presentations from smaller service providers. One of the sessions or one of the tracks that I personally was interested in was scanning and metrology. I wanted to learn more about what are the current standards, what are the current developments in meeting standards, and how are we measuring and verifying and qualifying additively manufactured parts. There was a whole track on that session. I learned a lot. Ryan Timbo did a great presentation on using CT scan data to verify and qualify first article parts. We don't currently offer a CT scanner, but I could definitely see us adding that to our arsenal here in the future because it's a great way to know and understand the full 3D geometry of your part, especially interiors like on this part where you really can't measure that part without destructively, destroying it. But a CT scanner allows us to do that. I mentioned break time and delicious food. This is the type of stuff that I had to test my willpower with about twice a day, every day, and then also open bar every single night. It took a lot of willpower to not eat the maple bacon donuts and Butterfinger donuts, but I did a pretty good job. If you have a sweet tooth, I would say plan on coming home with a few extra pounds at AMUG. It's that type of event. Speaking of partners, Desktop Metal was a big sponsor of AMUG, and I would say they were probably one of the most talked about and most well-attended presenters in the entire show. This is Rick Fulop doing a keynote speech, and you can see that room is packed to the gills. It's standing room only. There's definitely 100+ people there. I didn't see a room this full in terms of people versus seats at any other point in the entire presentation or conference. They also had some smaller breakout sessions. Allison Schuster did a really good one on Desktop Metal applications for the studio system. If you guys have been following our webinars, you've seen us talk about our studio system here in Salt Lake City. We are still printing parts for prototypes, but we're also investigating short run in tooling or long run tooling. Allison shared a case study with a local company to them called Built Right Tool and Die. You see a printed part there that's been CNC machined and EDM'd to size, and this is actually a production tool for the DM Studio system. They use it to injection mold a Delrin part, a Delrin component of the machine. So some interesting applications. Probably one of my favorite presentations was by Jerry Feldmiller. He's from Orbital ATK, and he is in charge of running their Stratasys 450 MC that they run Nylon 12 CF on. In Jerry's own words, this was his favorite material, and I can definitely see why it's one of my favorite materials. It's incredibly strong. It's tough. It's got all sorts of properties that Orbital ATK finds enticing, like its static dissipative capabilities, its RF abilities. This part has been a slightly post-processed. Over towards the right side of the part, it's been sanded. You can see how smooth it comes out. It's companies like Utah Trike here in Utah that's using this material for end-use parts. They tumble them. You couldn't tell if they're printed or injection molded. Jerry said that at Orbital ATK, they're using Nylon 12 CF right now primarily for integration services, but they hope to have a part in flight later this year. He shared all sorts of different parts and geometries. If you happen to be coming to our event in Seattle later this week, I'm going to be presenting more on what Jerry's doing at Orbital ATK. I mentioned that AMUG has an offsite activity every year. Last year at Chicago, we went to the Science Museum, and it was cool. But this year, we went to the Gateway Motorsports Park, and it was a blast. So if you've been, you know this. If you haven't been, the offsite activity is a complete secret until you arrive. So everybody loads up into buses. There was about 1,700 attendees this year. So they loaded up, I think, 40 huge buses, and we caravanned out, and we start pulling up to the motorsports park, and all of the guys on the buses just started going crazy. And I'm sure the girls too, but they're more outnumbered in our industry, believe it or not. But 1,700 people at the motorsports park. We were able to do go-kart racing. They have a drift track where we were able to do ride-alongs in the Challenger Hellcats on the drift track. And then we were also able to do ride-alongs with the NASCAR race cars. And so you can see smile on my face. I was pretty happy about that. I do have this quick video here taken from inside the cart. I don't know how well it's going to broadcast over the webinar. Might be a little choppy, but if you guys view this on YouTube later on, you should get some of the experience that I had. It was pretty sick. 2 laps around the track. I don't know how fast we were going, but it was fast enough to feel the G-forces as you come down into those turns. It's for that reason that I just love AMUG, and I'm going to do everything I can to go again. Like I said, the knowledge share and the networking is priceless. You know, a couple weeks later, we go to Rapid. Rapid+TCT. It was in Fort Worth, Texas this year. Rapid+TCT is a little bit different type of show. It's larger than AMUG, both in terms of exhibitors and attendees. It might be the largest. I'm not 100% certain on that, but it's definitely the largest AM-focused conference that I know of in North America. It's a little bit shorter. It's just a few days. It's focused more on the AM industry. So I would say it's more of a show for the OEMs and the exhibitors, and the users are there to experience what they have to offer. For that reason, you see a lot of new product announcements happening at Rapid every year. And we had some of those this year with our own vendors. I said AMUG had about 1,700, between 1,700 and 1,800 attendees. Rapid had over 6,000. They do have some networking events, keynotes, presentations. My experience this year is that I wasn't able to attend the presentations. There are much fewer presentations. I assume that the quality is just as good as AMUG, but my sense is that there's fewer presentations. We did have our own event. We had a Stratasys sneak peek event the first night of the show. So this was an after-hours show where we invited a lot of our customers and co-hosted an event with Stratasys. And Stratasys brought out the big guns. You know, their president, Rich Garrity, was in attendance, and some other big names there to talk about what's new for Stratasys coming up this year. I was able to present on what's new for the J750 and a machine called the J735, which is a smaller version of that, which is new. J750 improvements that we were able to talk about were some new materials, vivid magenta and vivid yellow, which are going to give us more accurate reds, oranges, things of that nature. Some updates in the GrabCAD print software that expand our color palette from about 350,000 materials to 500,000 materials. And then also some changes that allow us to print clears with our Verma files. So the Verma files are the photorealistic color prints, you know, prints that we can add color textures and images and things like this eyeball. Historically, we couldn't do that and also print clear, but now we can. So in the context of this eyeball, we have the nice colorful iris, and then in the center, it's all clear. So you have depth to the print. Very nice. Here's some other color plus Verma file prints. And, you know, these, when you see them in person, they are some of the very first prints that meet the challenge that we often play, and that is when you're looking at a photo of a print, you have to ask yourself, is it real or is it print? And, you know, in the past, well, in the far past, you could always tell it was a print. You could see the layering, the colors were off. In more recent past, it became harder to tell if the parts were printed or not. it's getting even better with the new color palette, the ability to print clears and whatnot. It's becoming much harder for us to distinguish if a part is actually a real, in this case, glass part with actual nail polish on the inside, or is it a single 3D print? Another thing that Stratasys allowed us to divulge during our event was, some of their new metal technology. Rafi from Stratasys had one of their aluminum parts from their new kind of undisclosed secret technology. He had it there, and then at their booth at Rapid, they had more parts seen here. So I have some close-ups of these parts. These are their metal parts from Stratasys, and this is not Stratasys Direct, so these didn't come off laser, DMLS machines or EBM machines. They didn't come off any sort of existing OEM machine. They came off Stratasys internally developed metal machines. They are aluminum, and they are based on the PolyJet technology. They include some sort of post-processing, like I want to say is sintering, but they don't use that word. They weren't telling us a lot about these parts, to be honest, other than the fact that they are going to tell us more about it next year. It sounds like that the technology should work about 7 to 9 times faster than existing laser-based systems. The part surface finish seems good. Part properties are supposed to be isotropic. They're supposed to be, spec properties for powdered metallurgical parts. All aluminum to begin with, but they should be able to branch out into other materials. This is something that I can't wait to have more info to share with you guys, but other than the pictures right now and just a little bit of info, that's all I have. Sneak peek of the trade show floor. Like I said, we had about 350 plus exhibitors, and I was only there for a day. So I was running around, tried to spend as much time as I could at the different booths, but it's just too many to really get a feel for. Even if you were there all 3 days, the expo's only open 21 hours in total. So 21 hours, 350 booths, you do the math. That's a lot of walking around. We had a booth as well. GoEngineer had a booth. Our Carrollton office is only about 30 minutes from the Fort Worth Convention Center. So we brought a handful of guys to come and do some live scanning to show off our Ultim parts. We had our Desktop Metal studio system running there, printing. It's a great show for us because it really gives us a chance to see some familiar faces in the industry and also some familiar faces, from our customers and give them a glimpse as to what's the latest and greatest. Speaking of, getting to know the other exhibitors and working with our partners, Desktop Metal made a huge splash on the exhibit floor. They had the largest booth on the entire show floor. You can see there on the left, it actually has 2 stories. So we call it a booth, but it's almost like a little city where they had meeting rooms that you could book out, and it was quite the show. On the right-hand side here, we have one of the displays that they had up. This is displaying parts off their production system. So, for the past year, we've been talking a lot about the studio system. We put out some webinars and some videos on our YouTube page about our experiences with the studio system so far. It's been great. The studio system is FDM based, but their production system is powder based. It's based on binder jetting. And so the types of geometries you can create are a little bit different. What you see there on the right-hand side is you have a microscope set up, and in the top right corner, you see a display of that microscope view. You can start to see that powdered metallurgy, evidence of the powdered metal part there in that lattice structure. Very fine structure. These aren't the best photos, but a little bit more close up. This is something that we couldn't do in the studio system, but the production system's perfect for it. The production system creates those impeller wheels that you see on the left there at a total cost of about less than $5 per part. in full production, total cost of the part. We're talking material costs, energy costs, labor costs, machine depreciation, all of that in full production. It's building those parts out of metal for less than $5 a part, which is insane. And it's doing it at a rate of, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds a day, if not in the thousands a day. This wasn't really an official announcement as far as I could tell, but this was the first time that I've seen the actual mock-up of the production system on display publicly. It's a big machine, and maybe part of the reason why they had such a big booth there. This is the production printer in its entirety. There's also a furnace that they had on display and a couple other components to the full system. But it was really cool to see this in person. I think this caught a lot of people's attention. That Desktop Metal booth was busy all day for as long as I was there. Lots of interest, just like at AMUG. I think it was definitely the most popular vendor at AMUG as well. So that was kind of a recap. Like I said, it was kind of more focused on my experiences, particularly with Stratasys and Desktop Metal. And there is a distinct difference between the two conferences. My favorite's AMUG because at the heart of it, I'm a user of 3D printers, and AMUG is very user-focused. But if you are a buyer or if you are in the market for a new 3D printing system, or you want to learn more about the industry, then honestly, Rapid might be a better fit. There's more exhibitors and there's more to see and touch and feel there. So if you want more information on these events and just 3D printing industry in general, I compiled a few websites that I use personally that have reporters, and they help you keep up on the AM industry news. 3D printing industry, 3D print, TCT magazine, 3Ders.org. Those are all excellent resources. My favorite, the one I have highlighted there, is actually an RSS feed. And it compiles stories from all of these sources plus dozens and dozens more. It's going to be hard to use that last link to find information about, say, AMUG because it's 3 weeks old. And this is an RSS feed. So I typically only see news for the last week, but I set that as my homepage so I see it, the new news every day as I log in. So I want to thank you guys for joining me on this webinar. Short little recap of the April conferences. Plenty more 3D printing conferences coming up later this year. We've got 3D printing industry. We've got IMTS this year. Can't wait to go to IMTS. 2 years ago, they had a huge additive presence, and I expect to see more. Mazak had an awesome booth at Rapid with one of their hybrid subtractive 5-axis subtractive machines with an additive head. Mazak says they're going to come out with more heads that will allow you to do like DMLS type processes, EBM type processes, all sorts of different things. So the machine tool industry is rapidly entering and merging with the AM industry. If you guys have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email, hit me up on YouTube or LinkedIn. Happy to touch base with you guys. If you guys are planning on going to these events next year, let me know. I'd love to meet up with you. Thank you for joining. Catch you next time.